fictional realities surrounding famous superheroes are often the product of decades of world building. This video is about how writers tell new stories with them. What's up, this is Matchstick, and we're talking about the creative in creative writing. The type of superhero worlds I'll be talking about belong to mainstream characters, which I'll define as being well known by the general populace. This basically means heroes that have headlined multiple Hollywood movies. However, superhero films are almost exclusively about characters and worlds that have developed in comic book form, so fiction in that medium is what I'll be talking about. In comics, all these characters have at least one of what are called ongoing series, which means the comic essentially has no end and the publication is ongoing. Because these series have been running for literally decades without end, different writers and artists have worked on them, making the end result one of communal world building. This type of multi-writer, unending narrative is what I want to talk about because it involves storytelling techniques that are unique to this format, and thus to characters like these. However, these days, after hundreds of stories have been told with these characters, these worlds have become so dense and complicated that we can only truly understand things if we start at the beginning. So we have our hero, but he's just standing there, so let's give him an antagonist. And these two characters present us with a basic plot. You know how this goes. The hero finds out that the villain's off doing something evil. The hero confronts the villain, foiling his plans, and they fight. The hero wins, and the villain pays the price. Boom, story over. Except superheroes are recurring characters that aren't in just one story. The first villain's out of the picture, so a writer might make up a new guy, have him do something different, and then he pays the price. With the third story, we introduce a new guy. The thing is, before long, having new villains appear in every story gets old. Having a different thread each story still works for longer forms of fiction, like mystery novels. The kind of comics we'll be talking about are a more evolved beast. Let's start by shaking things up just a little. Previously defeated villains come back to face the hero again with new threats, new good guys join the fight, and characters that were once just in the background are fully developed. We bring in some all-powerful organized crime, a love interest for our hero, some trips to alternate worlds, and the classic shapeshifter villain, and soon enough we find ourselves with a small cast of recurring good and bad guys. Obviously this is nothing though, actual comic universes can have hundreds of characters. But it's at this point that things get interesting. A cast of good guys and villains in a superhero universe is sometimes known by writers as a toy box, and it's called this because this is what you have to work with when writing stories about superheroes with expansive histories. If you find yourself landing a job writing big superheroes, you can hypothetically use any character from decades of previous writing to tell a story. Sound fun? It is, and that's why the jobs are considered dream gigs and people write fan fiction. In today's comic industry, writers have moved pretty far from the one-issue basic plot, which can be referred to now as a one-shot. Sure, you might have a villain do the same sort of crime there would in a basic plot, but in today's writing, that's more likely to be a lure distracting the hero. And a plot that resolves itself in a single issue today is a rarity. Today's comic writing can be broken down into what are known as arcs and runs. An arc is a story, usually told by a single writer and an art team, that stretches over multiple issues and often consists of an entire 3-act structure. These days comics are generally collected in books of 5 or 6 issues, so arcs tend to be that length or double it. A run, however, can last well over 60 issues and will consist of multiple arcs, again usually by the same writer and occasionally with the same artist on board for the bulk of it. Considering today's single issues are around 24 pages long, the 60-issue run adds up to around 1,400 comic pages. Point being, runs are gigantic works of fiction, and when you spend 6 years or so on a title, you have room to craft a truly epic story, and writers do. Unlike fiction that starts from scratch, writers on big books don't have to build up characters and have almost endless old material to use. Which isn't all good news, however. The actual event-after-event fictional history of the character is known as continuity, and it's something fans tend to care a lot about. But if part of continuity is getting in the way of a new writer, something known as a retcon may be pulled, an action that literally changes the character's past and will probably piss off the character's fan base. That aside, writers do a lot of creative stuff with the characters they've been handed. Villains will team up to amplify threats, good guys will break ties. Bad guys turn good, good guys turn bad. Sometimes one writer will kill a character off to tell a story, and that character will be brought back by another writer as a way to tell a new story. Great writers may even take an obscure character from decades ago and flesh them out into new threats or allies. In one very common aspect of runs, you might have a character face several villains in early arcs before finding out that a more powerful villain was pulling the strings. The more powerful villain in this situation is known as the Big Bad. In bigger runs, the main character may even die, which is a pretty easy way to shake things up and happens more frequently than you'd think. Which brings us back to the concept of the toy box. The thing about writing big superheroes is that, as they say, you have to put the toys back in the box. Things have to end at the same point that they began, with the status quo relatively unaltered. For example, in a run where the main character supposedly dies, they'll almost certainly come back before another writer takes the reins. This means that superhero stories, even giant ones like runs, are exercises in making as much happen as possible without anything actually happening. But even if writers can't really subtract from the character's world, they're always adding to it. Anything in any arc or run on a superhero is now part of a much bigger story and can be mined by future writers. Another piece of communal world building in the bigger, decades-long story. Writing the big-time characters requires a specialized form of storytelling. Comics can be cliché and even juvenile, but the ecosystem they exist in can create tales that are completely unique. In a world where fiction has become structurally cliched, that's certainly worth something.